Hi, my name's Eric Kruger from Stratacom, and I'm going to show you how to use our copy Azure users to JSM assets object. So this app will allow you to copy your Azure users into JSM assets, where you can use them however you want. And it'll also sync your JSM assets users into, it'll add their Atlassian ID, so it can look that up too. So here I'm in the configuration section. So the first field we've got is the object's going to hold your people. I've just got a people, my Azure Office 365 schema. So this is going to show your object name followed by your schema name in case you've got objects with the same name. You can see what schema they're in. And then I'm going to put the Azure fields that I'm going to pull down. I've got a nice list here of fields that you can, these are the most common. If you want different ones, you will probably have to ask your Azure admin for that. I've got this little checkbox to exclude inactive users. So if you don't want to pull inactive users down, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can check this box, or you can put in the filter, like in account enabled equals true. The only issue with the filter is they do not support Delta queries. And if you've got a few thousand Azure users, you'll probably want to use Delta queries. What Delta queries do, the first run, it'll pull down everybody and it'll do the sync. And then every subsequent run after that, it will only pull the users in Azure that have changed since the last run. So you'll see the Delta query will show up here in the Delta query box, and there's a little button to reset it if you ever want to do a full sync again. Like I said, this is where you can put your filter. Filters are not compatible with Delta query, so I'm just not going to use one. Your Azure tenant ID and application ID and secret, you'll need to enter those. And then we want to tell the system which field in assets we're going to store the Azure ID. And this is going to be our primary key for Azure to look this user up and update it. So I've just got a field called Azure ID. If you want to retrieve managers, and if they're in a user in the same object, you can pick the field. Right now we only support managers being stored in the same object. So for example, the manager field is a link back to this employee field. And then you can add your mappings. This side pulls from the list that you've got above of Azure fields, and this side pulls the list of fields in your JS assets. You shouldn't get these fields until the first thing you need to do is fill in your object ID, and then click save, you'll get this mappings. Now, if we want to update the JSM asset object, the Atlassian ID, we can do that. We just need to give it the field we're going to store the Atlassian ID in my system, that's called Jira account. And then the field that we're going to look the Atlassian user up with. So in my system, that's called mail, which is email in Azure ID. So we're going to use their email to look them up in Atlassian, and then we're going to store them in this Jira account. And then we've got a few things here, results per page. This is against JSM assets. 1,000 is a good number here. I don't think you can go above it. I think right now Atlassian changed, and you can only do 1,000 at a time. So the way this works is we'll pull down all the asset records and compare them against all the Azure records and see who's missing and who needs to be updated. And then concurrent imports. So we actually can run concurrent imports. I've got mine set to 10. I've had good luck with 25 with customers that have a couple hundred JSM seats. It will bump up against I say there doesn't seem to be a limit, but actually there are REST API limits. I know 50s might be too many unless you're a bigger company. So start maybe with 25. If you error out and you see REST API errors, drop this down. So I've got 10 for mine. Then you click save, you'll get a little green success message once that's saved. And now you can go over to the application. It'll look like this. So the app, when you open it from the side, it'll actually look like this. So it's got a few things here: last successful run, if there's a filter, and actually if you have a Delta query. So I'm just going to start this import. It's going to give me some feedback. Now there are 25-second runtime limitations in Forge, which this is written in, but because we're doing all of the back end paging front end, we will not hit that 25-second limitation. So here you can see we're fetching Azure users, but we're only getting the active ones. So I'm actually because we can't use a query because I'm using a Delta, a lot of these aren't going to be returned. So I think I've got 5,000 users in my Azure, and I'm only going to return a few of those. I'm just going to pause this until this is done. Okay, we're back. I think this is almost done. Yep, now we're going out and getting the managers. So the managers is a separate API call. If you do want to store the managers, this can take a pretty long time. You can only return like 20 managers at a time from Azure. So it can take some time. Mine should go pretty quick because I think I don't have that many users. I've got 71 Azure users I've retrieved out of 5,000. I've got a lot of inactives because I have test users in my Azure system. So here we're retrieving the managers. We're just about done with the manager retrieval. Normally this runs a little faster. I don't know, everything seems to be running pretty slow. Okay, so now we're updating users. I believe my users didn't have any managers, so this is new. I'm updating them with all the manager information. And we're updating 10 at a time, which is pretty cool. We're just sending 10 requests in at a time to update instead of doing them one at a time. So that goes a lot faster. And like I said, that number can be set to anything. So you can set that to 25 or 50, and you just have to make sure you don't bump up against your REST API limitation that Atlassian has set. So once again, I'm just going to pause this until this is complete. Okay, so we can see that was updated. I updated 59 users out of my 71. I think those are the ones that had managers that didn't before. We can see that Delta query is now in effect. So if I refresh this, we'll actually see that it's got a Delta query that's going to run. And actually, I can come over here and refresh this, and I can actually see the Delta query. So that'll actually show up in my configuration. Therefore, it's so that you know if there's a Delta query or not. You could potentially copy that and run it if you wanted to, like in Postman or something, and see what comes back. But then you'd want to rerun the users manually. So let's say the Delta only updates back users that changed since the last run. And after every Delta update, we get another Delta update back from Microsoft, and we store that for the next Delta update. So we're a customer now. They've got 11,000 Azure users. Their Delta updates are taking about 10 seconds to run. So they can run them and come over here and run this in about 10 seconds. So there will be an option to schedule this in the future. I'm waiting for Atlassian to come out with their 15-minute run times out of EAP. And once that's out, we'll be able to run that. So that's taking long. I'm going to pause this again. It says ready. Okay, so you can see here's our Delta query. It's read only. I don't want people messing with that. I do have a button to reset it if you want to reset it and rerun a full sync. You can still leave this checked. If you don't have this checked, it will not save your Delta query. So you'll want to check that even if you reset this Delta query. And we can see here the last successful runtime, the Delta query is in effect, if we have any filters, and what version. I've got a little version on here so I can kind of keep track if customers have the newest version or not. So now if I rerun with Delta query, I'll just restart the import. So I'll run this again, and then I'll tell you what the other button is for. If at any time you want to stop this, you can. It might take a few seconds to stop because we're checking for that stop kind of in between API calls, but it shouldn't take that. So right now it's just pulling the Delta query out back from Azure. So it's fetching the Azure users. We shouldn't have any changes, so this shouldn't take very long at all. We should get that 0 results returned. Yep, so no Azure users was run. I will say 31 seconds, there must be something going on with Azure because normally this would take less than 5 seconds. So if you want to sync your Atlassian IDs only, and this would be the case where you've got the JSM asset users, but for whatever reason you didn't create their Atlassian accounts, and maybe you're those with Guard, so you decide to create a bunch of Atlassian accounts with Guard. It's typically going to be portal users. If you want to sync those, you can just click this sync Atlassian IDs, and that'll sync the Atlassian IDs. So they will end up looking something like this. They'll have an Azure ID, an email, They may have an Atlassian ID. If they're an Atlassian user, they'll have an Atlassian ID also. So, but this is where they'll go. This is what they look like, and if they've got a manager, it'll be down here. An Atlassian ID would be in their Jira account, and then here's their Azure ID. So, really nice way to keep these updated. A lot of people use these for approvals, different things like that, but Atlassian doesn't really have a great way to keep your assets in sync, and that's where this app would come in. All right, thanks.